Hello, and welcome to Sleep with Stories. Tonight, we're going to let the noise of the modern world fall away, leaving it far behind as we travel to a time and a place that moved at a different pace. A pace dictated by the sun, the seasons, and the quiet, rhythmic work of human hands. You probably won't make it through this day, but that's rather the point, isn't it? So, find a comfortable position, let your shoulders relax, and feel the weight of your body being held completely by the surface beneath you. If you feel so inclined, we'd love for you to gently press the like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know you're out there, resting with us. And in the comments below, perhaps you could tell us where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's a quiet comfort to know we're all watching the same moon, just from different windows. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. Let your breathing slow and your mind begin to drift. The first thing you're aware of is the cold. Not a biting, aggressive cold, but a deep, persistent chill that has seeped through the thick stone walls of your room and settled into your very bones overnight. You lie still for a moment under the heavy weight of a woven alpaca wool blanket. It's a coarse, honest fabric, smelling faintly of wood smoke, lanolin, and the high, thin air of the Andes. You can feel the distinct, scratchy pattern of the weave against your cheek. You've been sleeping on a simple platform bed, a bed that makes no apologies for its firmness. There is no concept of a pillow-top mattress here, in the Viceroyalty of Peru. Sometime around the year 1650, you open your eyes. There is no sudden blast of light. The only window in your small, whitewashed room is a narrow slit in the stone, more of an arrow loop than a source of illumination. It frames a perfect, stark rectangle of the pre-dawn sky, a deep and velvety indigo that is just beginning to soften at the edges. No birds are singing yet. The world is holding its breath. This high up, everything seems to take a little more effort, including the sun. You sit up, swinging your legs over the side of the bed. The blanket falls away, and the cold air rushes to meet your skin. The floor is packed earth, cool and smooth beneath your bare feet. Your clothes are folded on a small wooden stool beside you, simple trousers and a tunic of undyed wool. Dressing is a silent, methodical process. There's no rush. The sun has the audacity to be cheerful, cresting the jagged, silver-tipped peaks in the distance, but its light is still thin and weak, casting long, dramatic shadows that make the small valley look like a crumpled piece of parchment. Your room is sparse. Besides the bed and stool, the only other object of note hangs from a wooden peg on the wall. It's the reason you're here. To a stranger, it might look like a piece of forgotten decoration, or perhaps a strange, fringed belt. It is a collection of strings, a main, thick cord of cotton, from which hang dozens of thinner, color-coded woolen threads. Some are the natural, creamy white of llama wool, others the rich brown of an alpaca, and some are dyed in brilliant hues: a deep royal blue, a vibrant cinnabar red, a yellow the color of maize. This is a quipu, your Khipu dot. You reach out and touch it. The strings are cool and slightly stiff. This one is old, a practice tool you've been working with for years. Its knots are worn smooth from being tied, untied, and read by your fingers 1,000 times. You are a kipakamok, a keeper of the knotted cords, a talking knot keeper, an accountant. Your job is, essentially, data entry for an empire that has technically ceased to exist, but whose methods are still, begrudgingly, the most reliable system around. The Spanish officials, with their quills and their expensive fragile paper, still need you. They need your knots. It's a major historical fact that often gets overlooked. For well over a century after the conquest, the Spanish administration relied on the Incan Quipu system for tribute, census data, and legal records, finding it far more accurate than their own fallible scribes. They don't understand it, not really. They see it as a rustic tool, but they trust its results. Your boss, the local corregidor, is a man who believes deeply in paperwork. Even when the paper is a bundle of strings that looks suspiciously like a disassembled mop dot. You take the quipu from its peg. The weight is familiar in your hands. You run your fingers over a specific pendant cord, a red one. The knots on it are a record of last season's potato harvest from the communal storehouse. A large knot at the bottom for the hundreds, a few smaller ones above it for the tens, and a cluster of even smaller knots for the ones. It's a language for your fingertips. The specific fiber of the strings is important, too. Most of these are fine-spun alpaca wool, which holds the dye so well and gives a clean, crisp feel to the knots. Historians still debate whether the specific direction of the plier string spun to the right versus a string spun to the left held its own layer of meaning. A piece of information now lost to the quiet mountain air. For you, it is simply the way things are done. You sling the keep over your shoulder. The day is begun. There are numbers to be tied, stories to be recorded in the silent, tactile language of thread. You step out of your small room into the central courtyard of the administrative compound. The air is sharp and clean, so thin it feels like it might crackle. The sun is higher now, warming the tops of the stone walls but leaving the packed earth of the courtyard in a cool, blue shadow. A handful of other people are moving about with a quiet, unhurried purpose. A woman with a thick braid down her back carries a steaming clay pot towards the kitchens, the smell of boiling potatoes and herbs trailing behind her like a ghost. 2 men in dusty ponchos lead a train of stoic, unimpressed llamas through the main gate, their soft padded feet making almost no sound. The llamas eye you with an expression of profound indifference, as if you and your entire human endeavor are a minor, temporary inconvenience. You give a respectful nod to a stern-looking man standing by the main doorway. He is Wayner, the senior Kipokamark. He is your master, your teacher, your boss. His face is a roadmap of wrinkles carved by a lifetime of high-altitude sun and intense concentration. He holds a magnificent quipu in his hands, a vast and complex creation with hundreds of chords in a rainbow of colors, some even wrapped with threads of silver. It's a master record of the entire district, every person, every animal, every bushel of maize, every piece of tribute paid or owed. It is a library of data, and he is its librarian. He simply inclines his head, a gesture that means, "You're not late. Let's get to work." You follow him into the main administrative hall. It's a long, dark room, the air thick with the smell of dust and old wool. Sunlight streams in through the high windows, illuminating swirling dust motes in golden shafts. Along one wall, several large chests are open, spilling forth a cascade of kippus, a silent, tangled archive of decades of life in this valley. Your job today is to create a new one. Wayner leads you to a simple wooden table. On it sits a pristine, unknotted quipu. Its primary cord is thick and white, and from it hang about 50 clean, empty pendant strings of various colors. For corn, white for silver, brown for llamas, red for soldiers or tribute, green for land. It looks naked, expectant. Beside it is a small pile of loose, dyed strings of other colors, ready to be attached if you need to create new categories. This is your blank slate, your empty spreadsheet. The task is to record the tribute from a nearby village, which was delivered yesterday. Specifically, the wool. You are to document the number of skeins of alpaca wool versus the rougher llama wool, and to note which households delivered their quota and which are in arrears. It is the kind of meticulous, repetitive work that is either maddening or deeply meditative. For a Quipu, it is the latter. It is the rhythm of your life. Your job is to translate the messy, chaotic reality of daily life into an ordered, logical system. Villagers have already given their verbal reports to a clerk who has made temporary marks on a dusty wooden board. Now you will make it official. You will give the numbers a physical, permanent home. You pick up the blank quipu. The wool of these strings feels familiar, the same rough comfort as the blanket you pushed away just an hour ago, but smoother, more refined. You take your place at the table as Wayner begins to call out the first set of data. Household of Quispy, he says, his voice a low monotone. 30 skeins of alpaca wool, 10 skeins of llama. You select the first pendant cord on your quipu, let's say. It's a deep brown, the color designated for this specific village's tribute. You slide your fingers down the cord towards the bottom, where the thousands and hundreds would go. There are no thousands or hundreds here, so you move up to the middle of the string. Here, you will tie the knots for the tens. You deftly twist the string, looping it through itself 3 times. A single, elegant knot with 3 turns. That's 30. It's the core of the entire system, a beautiful based-in positional decimal system, just like the one you use today, but rendered in 3 dimensions. The position of the knot on the cord determines its value: ones, tens, hundreds. It was a system so intuitive and powerful that it governed an empire. Now for the llama wool. You could use a separate cord, but Wayner has taught you to be efficient. You will attach a subsidiary cord to this main brown one. You take a loose, beige-colored string, the color for llama product sand, tie it to the main cord, just below your 30 knot. On this new, smaller string, you tie a single knot with 1 turn. 10, so now. The brown cord for the Quispy household has a main value of 30 and a subsidiary value of 10. Alpaca and llama accounted for. Scholars still debate whether certain complex knot types, which look like little figures of 8 or have extra loops, represented non-numerical information, perhaps functioning as a kind of 3-dimensional writing, signaling a specific instruction or quality, or, if they were, simply elaborate markers for special categories. To you, they are just part of the vocabulary you learned at Wayner's side. You pass another Quipu mark as you settle in. A young man who gives you a nod that says, the new tribute records. Try not to get your numbers in a twist today. You offer a small smile. The work is slow. It requires focus. You can't listen to a podcast or check your phone. There is only the string, your fingers, and the numbers spoken into the quiet air. Wayner drones on, household of Mamani, 25. Skeins of alpaca. You reach for the next cord. The day stretches before you, a long, straight thread waiting to be filled with the simple, elegant knots of other people's lives. The work is a quiet meditation. Your world shrinks to the space between your hands. The drone of Wayner's voice becomes a background hum, like the buzzing of a distant insect. Household of Tupa, 32 skeins of alpaca, 8 of jama. You reach for the next clean cord. a rich green one. Your fingers find their familiar rhythm. For the 32, you tie a knot with 3 turns in the tens position and a knot with 2 turns in the ones position just above it. Then you attach a subsidiary beige cord for the llama wool and tie. A knot with 8 turns, simple, clear, irrefutable. The Spanish officials who occasionally stride through this hall, their boots loud on the stone floor, see only a quaint, folksy craft. They don't see the elegant logic, the built-in error checking. They see primitive knots. You see a database. A funny thought drifts through your mind. They trust your knots more than their own fancy signatures, which can be forged. No one can forge your knots, not without Wayner noticing, anyway. His eyes miss nothing. He once spotted a knot tied with the wrong tension from across the room. An error that would have thrown off a census count by 100 bushels of quinoa. He moves behind you now, his shadow falling over your work. You don't tense up, it's part of the process. His gnarled finger points to the knot you just tied for the household of Tupa. The second turn is loose, he says, his voice soft but firm. It could be misread in low light. Tie it again. He is not angry. He is a guardian of accuracy. A single misplaced knot could mean a family is unjustly fined, or a village goes hungry because their surplus was miscalculated. So you patiently untie the knot, the wool protesting slightly, and retie it with a firm, even pull. Perfect, he grunts. In satisfaction, a sound that is high praise, and moves on. This focus on numbers is only part of the Quipu tradition. This is a major historical point that the Spanish, in their quest for quantifiable tribute, have largely ignored. The Incan Empire used these same cords to record stories, genealogies, and lore. These were the narrative kippers they used. Complex variations in color, fiber type, and knot structure to encode epic poems and the histories of kings. In a corner of the room, you can see a truly ancient quipu, so old its colors have faded to dusty pastels. It's a chaotic tangle of hundreds of cords, looking less like an accounting tool and more like the result of a cat having a very bad day with a basket of yarn. That, you've been told, contains the lineage of a great local lord, tracing his family back 10 generations. Wayner can still read parts of it, but much of its meaning is fading. Like a story told one too many times. Whether these narrative kippers could be read like a book by any trained kipperkamak, or if they served more as mnemonic devices for a specific oral tradition, remains a source of passionate academic disagreement. For you, it feels like both. The knots prompt the memory, but the story lives in the telling. The Spanish have no interest in this. They want numbers. How many people, how much land, how much tax. The soul of the Quipu, its ability to sing the story of a people, is being quietly filed away, replaced by the cold, hard logic of the ledger. You continue your work, household after household. The pile of accounted tribute grows in your mind, a silent tally. This entire system of tribute is a distorted echo of an older way. The Incan concept of aini, or reciprocity, meant that communities helped each other, and everyone contributed labor to the state in exchange for security, food, and infrastructure. It was a complex web of obligation, a kind of societal insurance plan. Now, under the Spanish, it's just a one-way street. The tribute goes to the crown, and what comes back is, well, the continued presence of the corregidor and his small garrison of soldiers, which some might not classify as a benefit. You tie another knot, 20 skeins of alpaca, a simple knot with 2 turns. The sun has moved across the sky, and the shafts of light in the dusty room have shifted, now illuminating a different set of forgotten records in a forgotten chest. Finally, Wayne straightens up from his own complex quipu, a signal that the morning's work is done. The sun is high and bright in the sky, a searing white disk that makes the thin air feel almost warm. He gives you a curt nod. "Midday meal," he says, and turns to leave the hall. It's not a suggestion. You carefully lay your half-finished quipu on the table, its completed chords lying in neat, ordered rows. Its blank chords waiting patiently for the afternoon's data dot. You step back out into the courtyard. The light is almost blinding after the gloom of the record hall. The shadows are short and sharp. The llamas you saw this morning are now huddled together in a corner, chewing their cud with an air of philosophical resignation, thoroughly unimpressed by the dramatic mountain scenery. You suppose when you see it every day, it just becomes wallpaper. The air smells different now, not just of dust and cold stone, but of cooking fires and roasted grain. The woman with the thick braid is standing by a long, low bench, ladling a thick stew into simple earthenware bowls. You take one from her. She doesn't smile, but her eyes are kind. You murmur sulpaiki, a quiet thank you in Quechua, and she gives a small dip of her head in return. There are no grand dining halls here, no formal seating. People find a spot on a bench, a warm stone step, or simply stand in the sun. It's a moment of communal peace in the middle of a structured day. You find a place on a step, feeling the sun warm the back of your neck. You look down at your bowl. It's a humble meal, but a satisfying one. The stew is thick with quinoa and several kinds of potatoes. This, right here in your bowl, is a testament to one of the Andes' greatest gifts to the world. Before the Spanish arrived, the people here cultivated thousands of different potato varieties, a staggering biodiversity that the Europeans, with their wheat-centric palates, initially found bizarre. There are deep purple ones, lumpy yellow ones, slender red ones that look like fingers. They have different tastes, different textures, and grow at different altitudes. The potato would eventually save Europe from famine, but for now, the Spanish colonists mostly complain that it isn't bread, a true failure of imagination on their part. As you eat, you watch the quiet life of the compound. Near the gate, an old man sits, carefully selecting coca leaves from a small woven bag. He places them, one by one, into his cheek, forming a small quid. This is not a vulgar habit. It is a slow, deliberate ritual. The coca leaf is sacred here. It wards off hunger, fatigue, and the altitude sickness that can plague life this high up. It's used in offerings to the mountain spirits, the apis, and shared as a sign of respect. It's another part of this world that outsiders don't fully grasp, viewing it with suspicion rather than understanding. You finish your meal, the warmth spreading through your chest. The quiet conversations around you are a mix of Quechua and the heavily accented Spanish of the administrators. No one is entirely certain how the exact colors for quipu chords were standardized across the vast Incan Empire, or if regional variations were so great that a Kipakamoc from Cusco might struggle to read a quipu from Quito. You imagine it must have been a bit like regional accents, subtle differences that a trained ear, or, in this case, a trained hand could easily decipher. You take your empty bowl back to the kitchen, then drift back towards the hall. The break is over. The sun is beginning its slow descent towards the western peaks. The afternoon awaits, with more numbers, more strings, and more of the quiet. patient work of turning the world into knots. You return to your seat at the long wooden table. The air in the hall seems thicker in the afternoon, heavier with the day's accumulated dust and the silent weight of all the numbers trapped in these woolen archives. The light has changed. The sun is no longer directly overhead, and its rays slant through the high windows at a sharp angle, creating pools of warm orange light on the floor. It gives the room a sleepy, golden quality. Through the open doorway, you can just hear the faint, grumbling bleat of a llama, a sound of profound and eternal complaint. Wayna is waiting. His task for you this afternoon is different. He has a Quipu in his hands, one you recognize from a few weeks ago, a census record from another village. He hands it to you. Read it, he says. This is not a request. It is a test, an audit. He will sit beside you with his own master record, and you will call out the data, chord by chord, as he verifies it. It's a process far more than any modern performance review, mainly because your reviewer can spot a misplaced knot from 10 paces away and has the quiet, unshakable authority of a mountain peak. You lay the Quipu out on the table. For complex readings like this, you use a Quipu board, a simple wooden plank with a series of carved notches along the top. You settle the Quipu's main chord into the notches, allowing the pendant strings to hang freely, separated and organized. It prevents the chords from tangling, turning a chaotic bundle into a legible document. You take a deep breath. The Quipu has a distinct smell, a mixture of dried wool, the faint earthy scent of the brown dye, and something else, a sharper, peppery note from the yellow cords. Perhaps it's the plant used for the dye. It is theorized by some scholars that this olfactory signature might have been an intentional part of the Quipu's identity, a way to tell one record from another in a dark storage chest. Do you begin? Chord 1, white, silver tribute. You run your fingers down the string, feeling for the knots. Your fingertips are your eyes. 1 knot in the hundreds position, 5 turns, 500. 2 knots in the tens position, 4 turns total. Total, 524 units of silver. You pause, waiting. Wayna grunts, a low rumble of confirmation, and makes a small tick mark on his own board. You move to the next chord. Chord 2, yellow, maize. Your fingers dance down the string. 2 knots in the hundreds position, 6 turns. 260. 1 subsidiary chord, red, for spoilage. 1 knot, 5 turns. 5. This is the part that required subtlety. A subsidiary chord could mean anything from an addendum to an asterisk. Here, its red color signifies a loss, a deduction from the main count. The Spanish struggled with this multidimensional aspect of the Quipu, their flat paper ledgers unable to replicate the elegant way you could layer information. Their solution was usually just to scratch things out, a method that always looked messy and deeply untrustworthy. The young Kipakamark you saw earlier is struggling at the other end of the hall. He's working with one of the ancient narrative kippas, the one that looks like it's having a slow-motion philosophical breakdown. He holds a section of it up to the light, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if trying to decipher the unwritten rules of its tangled grammar. It is not known for certain if a Kipakamark always spoke the numbers or stories aloud as they read, or if it was a silent, internal process. You suspect it depended on the purpose. For an audit like this, a vocal reading is essential. For personal understanding, perhaps the knots spoke directly to the mind. You continue, chord by chord. The sun sinks lower. and the light in the room turns from gold to a soft, dusky rose. You read the numbers of people in a household, the number of their animals, the acres of their land. Each knot is a life, a family, a year of hard work. You are not just an accountant. You are a translator, turning the physical world into a language of texture and form. You finish the last chord, your voice a little hoarse. Wayne makes his final mark. He looks at his board, then at you. He gives a single, slow nod. You have passed. You haven't just read the numbers correctly. You have read them with the right rhythm, the right cadence. The day is winding down. The light outside the doorway has softened to a deep, bruised purple, and the jagged peaks of the mountains are now black silhouettes against a sky the color of a fading ember. The chill you felt this morning is creeping back into the stone walls, reclaiming its territory from the sun's temporary warmth. Most of the other workers have already left, their quiet footsteps echoing briefly in the courtyard before fading. Into the evening, only you and Wayne remain in the great hall, two silent figures in the growing dusk. It's time to finish your own Quipu, the one you started this morning. The tribute record. You have knotted the data for every household. Now, you must create the summary. This is the final, crucial step, tying the totals. You take a new, thick cord, this one a brilliant, shocking red band, attach it to the very beginning of the main chord. This will be your summary string. Its vibrant color marks it as important, a key to the rest of the document. The red dye comes from a tiny insect, the cochineal, which lives on the prickly pear cactus. It takes tens of thousands of them, carefully harvested and crushed, to produce a single pound of this deep crimson dye. For a time in Europe, it was one of the most valuable commodities to come out of the New World, more precious than many metals used to color the robes of cardinals and the coats of kings. A major historical fact is that this dye, this speck of crushed bug from a high-altitude cactus, became a cornerstone of global trade and a symbol of imperial wealth. The Spanish loved the color and the profit, but they showed remarkably little interest in the complex Andean culture that had perfected its production over centuries. Your task now is to perform a kind of physical mathematics. You go back through your pendant chords, one by one. You read the number of alpaca skeins from the first chord, then the second, then the third, adding them in your head. The Quispy households 30, plus Tupas 32, and so on. The mental arithmetic is second, nature to you. Once you have the grand total for alpaca wool, you tie the corresponding knots onto your red summary chord, a large knot for the hundreds, smaller knots for the tens and ones. You do the same for the llama wool, attaching a beige subsidiary string to your red cord to hold this secondary total. Your finished Quipu is no longer a blank slate. It is a document, a certified bureaucratic masterpiece of organized string. It tells a complete and accurate story of the village's wool tribute. Has a beginning, the summary chord, a body, the household data, and a clear, logical structure. There is a quiet satisfaction in this moment, the prodigital equivalent of hitting save after a long day's work. The messy reality of wool collection has been transformed into elegant, portable data. Some historians theorize that knots may have even been tied on the main, thick top chord of some quipus, perhaps to represent a grand total of all the subsidiary chords, a master number for the entire record. You hold up your finished work. Wayne takes it from you without a word. He doesn't need the light. His fingers, gnarled and knowing, glide over the knots. They trace the path of your work, from the first household to the final summary knot. He spends a long moment on the red cord, feeling the tension of the knots, the spacing, the number of turns. His face is unreadable in the dim light. Finally, he hands it back to you. "It is correct," he says. He then walks over to one of the chests and pulls out a small, ancient-looking quipu. He beckons you closer. He points to a knot on it, a complicated figure of 8 with an extra loop. "This knot," he says, his voice barely a whisper, "means paid under protest. A detail you've never been taught, a nuance lost to the Spanish desire for simple numbers." He is entrusting you with a piece of the deeper language. He places the old quipu back in its chest and closes the lid with a soft thud. He gives you one last look, then turns and walks out of the hall, his form dissolving into the twilight. You are left alone with your new quipu, the scent of wool and dye, and the profound, echoing silence of the hall. The day's work is done. You stand alone in the cavernous hall for a long moment, the finished quipu, a warm, dense weight in your hands. The silence is no longer just an absence of sound. It has a presence, a texture. It's the quiet of deep history, of countless days just like this one, stretching back through time. You can almost feel the ghosts of other kipikamoks at your shoulder, nodding in quiet approval of a knot well tied. Or perhaps that's just the high altitude air finally getting to you. You roll the quipu carefully, the pendant cords wrapping around the main cord, and tie it with a simple slip knot to keep it from unraveling. It is now a compact, portable bundle of information. You walk to the designated chest for new tribute records and place it inside, nestled amongst the others you have made this season. The soft click of the heavy wooden lid closing feels like a punctuation mark at the end of a very long sentence. Stepping out of the administrative hall and back into the courtyard feels like surfacing from deep water. The evening sky is a spectacle. The last vestiges of sunset have bled away, leaving behind a canvas of impossible, profound darkness. And the stars, up here, so far from the smudged, hazy skies of the coast, they are not gentle twinkles. They are fierce, brilliant diamonds, scattered across black velvet, so bright and close, you feel like you could reach up and touch them. The Milky Way is a luminous, shimmering river, a celestial road that the Incas called Mayu. This celestial river was a major focal point of their cosmology. They didn't just see constellations in the stars, but also in the dark patches of interstellar dust within the Milky Way, identifying shapes like the llama, the fox, and the toad in the blackness. The air is now truly cold, a dry, biting cold that stings your cheeks and makes your breath plume in front of you. The compound is quiet. The llamas are silent lumps of shadow. The only light comes from the flickering orange glow of the kitchen fire, spilling from a low doorway. You were drawn to it, not just for the warmth, but for the company. Inside, a few of the compound's permanent residents are gathered. The woman with the braid is there, her face softened by the firelight, mending a torn blanket. The old man who was chewing coca leaves this afternoon is now telling a story to a wide-eyed boy. His voice a low, rhythmic murmur in Queechua. You find a spot on a bench near the fire, stretching your cold hands towards the flames. No one asks you about your day. They know what you do. It's as normal and necessary as the woman's mending or the old man's stories. This is the rhythm of life. The work, the meal, the fire, the story, the sleep. Repeat, one of the men offers you a cup of something warm. You take it. It's a hot, sweet, purplish drink made from blue maize, spiced with cinnamon and cloves, brought from halfway around the world by the Spanish. It's an odd fusion, this ancient Andean crop mixed with the flavors of the Spice Islands. A small, drinkable summary of the complex, blended world you now inhabit. The old man's story is about a fox who tries to trick a condor into carrying him to the moon. You've heard it before, but you listen anyway. His voice is soothing, and the familiar tale is a comfort. The fire pops and crackles, sending a shower of sparks up towards the smoke hole in the roof. They dance for a moment against the darkness, tiny, fleeting stars mimicking the grand spectacle outside. The day's numbers, the 32, the 8, the 524 begin to fade from your mind, replaced by the simple warmth of the fire and the gentle cadence of the storyteller's voice. This, too, is a form of record keeping, you realize. The oral tradition passed from one generation to the next by the flickering light of a fire. It is less precise than your Quipu, perhaps, but it contains a different kind of truth. A truth about foolish foxes and wise condors, about the earth and the sky. A truth that no number can ever fully capture. The firelight makes shadows dance on the stone walls, turning the small kitchen into a cozy, living cave. The sweet, warm maize drink has chased the last of the day's chill from your bones, leaving a pleasant, heavy feeling in your limbs. The old storyteller, whose name is Conta, has finished his tale of the ambitious fox. Now he is looking at you, his dark eyes twinkling in the firelight. "And you, not keeper," he says, his voice raspy with age. "What stories did your strings tell you today?" It's a gentle tease. He knows your kippers are mostly tax records now, but he is also from a generation that remembers when the kippers sang of heroes and gods. You give a small shrug and a tired smile. The strings sang of wool, old man. A great many songs about wool. A truly thrilling epic. He chuckles, a dry, rattling sound. Ah, yes, the epic of the alpaca, a tale for the ages. The others around the fire smile. There is no malice in it, only a shared understanding of the world as it is. But even a story about wool is a story about people. Conta continues, his tone becoming more serious. It is the story of a woman's hands spinning. The thread, a shepherd guiding his flock, a family trying to meet its quota. The numbers are just the bones. You must remember the flesh, Kippakamok. His words resonate in the quiet room. It's something Waina teaches with his actions, but that Conta states plainly. The integrity of the numbers matters because they represent real lives, real labor. A misplaced knot is not just a clerical error. It is an act of disrespect to the people whose work it represents. You nod slowly, looking into the fire. I will remember. A young woman sitting across from you is spinning wool herself, not with a large wheel, but with a simple drop spindle. It's a small, weighted stick, a pushka that she sets spinning with a flick of her wrist. It twirls gracefully in the air, pulling fibers from a cloud of raw, fluffy alpaca wool tied to her arm and twisting them into a strong, even thread. The motion is hypnotic, a continuous, fluid dance of hand and fiber that has been practiced in these mountains for thousands of years. It's a strangely intimate detail of this culture that the raw fiber is often tied to the forearm or wrist of the spinner. Historians speculate that this physical connection to the wool, feeling its pull and texture against the skin, helped the spinner maintain a perfect, consistent tension in the thread. You watch her for a long time, the spindle rising and falling, twisting, twisting, twisting. It's another kind of not making, you realize. She is creating the very foundation of your work. The thread she spins tonight might one day become a Quipu cord, dyed and knotted to record the harvest of the very animal it came from. There's a beautiful, circular logic to it that feels deeply satisfying. It's a closed system, a perfect loop of production and record keeping. The thought makes you feel sleepy. The day has been long, a marathon of concentration. The fire is warm, the company is quiet, and the world feels reduced to this small, glowing circle of light. Eventually, the gathering breaks up. People stretch, murmur goodnights, and slip away to their own sleeping quarters, leaving you and the old storyteller alone by the dying embers of the fire. He pokes at the coals with a stick. "The Spanish," he says quietly, not looking at you. "They think the numbers are the story. They don't understand that the story is what gives the numbers meaning." It's a profound observation from a man who has seen his world turned upside down. The Spanish obsession with quantification, with tribute and taxation, has stripped the poetry from the process, leaving only the grammar. You have no answer for him, so you just nod. He seems to understand. He gives the coals one last stir, then rises slowly to his feet. "Rest well, knot keeper," he says. "Tomorrow, the strings will have new songs for you to learn." He shuffles out, leaving you alone with the glowing embers. And your thoughts? The compound is utterly silent now, except for the sound of the wind, a low, mournful sigh as it sweeps down from the high peaks. You are tired, down to your bones. It is time for sleep. You rise from the bench, the warmth of the fire clinging to you like a cloak. The kitchen is dark now, save for the faint, pulsing glow of the embers. You step back out into the central courtyard. The change is immediate and absolute. The cold is a physical presence, so sharp and pure it feels like it could shatter. Above, the star-dusted canopy of the sky seems to have rotated. The great river of the Mayan, now arching directly overhead. The moon has risen. It is not the soft, friendly moon of lower altitudes. Here, it is a hard, silver disk hanging in the profound blackness, casting sharp, eerie shadows that transformed the familiar shapes of the compound into something alien. The whitewashed walls glow with a ghostly luminescence. The sleeping llamas are mounds of spectral fleece. It feels like a different world, a landscape drained of color and warmth. You walk quietly across the packed earth, your footsteps making no sound. You pass the great administrative hall, a block of deep shadow, its secrets locked away for the night. You think of your Quipu, nestled in its chest, a tiny bundle of order in the vast, silent darkness. You remember Wayna's cryptic comment about the knot that means paid under protest. A flicker of defiance, a subtle rebellion encoded in a twist of wool. It's a secret language within a secret language. Your small room is just as you left it, a cell of cold stone. The single slit of a window now frames a sliver of the brilliant, moonlit sky. You don't light a candle. Your eyes have already adjusted. To the dark, you undress quickly, the cold air raising goosebumps on your skin, and slip under the heavy, scratchy comfort of your alpaca blanket. The packed earth floor leaches warmth from your feet. The bed platform is as unyielding as ever. There's a certain honesty to it. It makes no promises of luxury it can't keep. Unlike some people you could mention. You lie on your back, staring up at the stone ceiling, though you can't really see it in the gloom. You can hear the sound of your own breathing, the slow, steady beat of your own heart. The day replays itself in your mind. not as a series of events, but as a sequence of tactile sensations. The cool, smooth strings of the morning's blank quipu, the rougher texture of the older census quipu you had to read, the satisfying finality of the knots tightening under your fingers, the warmth of the clay cup of maize drink, the scratch of the wool blanket against your chin. Your mind drifts back to the numbers 32, 8, 524. They float in the darkness behind your eyelids, no longer just abstract figures, but representations of physical knots. A 3-turn knot and a 2-turn knot, an 8-turn knot. You can feel them in your muscle memory. This is the essence of being a Kipokimok. The knowledge isn't just in your head, it's in your hands. This is a major historical insight into the Quipu system. It was likely a deeply embodied practice. Modern researchers trying to decode Kipus often work from flat photographs or diagrams, but the Kipokimok worked in 3 dimensions, using touch, tension, and texture as part of the reading process. The information was not just visual, but kinesthetic, a strange cultural tidbit you once heard from a traveling merchant comes to mind. He claimed that in some far-off northern provinces, Kipokimoks would moisten their fingertips with a specific oil before a reading. Believing it not only protected their skin, but also enhanced their sensitivity to the subtle variations in the wool. Whether this was true or just a traveler's tale is impossible to know. But the image is a compelling one. The idea of anointing oneself for the sacred act of reading the knots. You are hovering in that strange, peaceful state between wakefulness and sleep. The day's events feel distant now, smoothed over by the quiet of the night. You think of Kuntra's story about the fox and the condor. It's a simple fable, yet it feels more profound than all the tribute accounts you tied today. Perhaps that's the difference between data and wisdom. Data tells you how many. Wisdom tells you why. You are a keeper of how many. Konta is a keeper of why. Both are necessary to make a world whole. With that thought, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion finally overtakes you. The silent language of the knots fades, and you drift into the dreamless, restorative dark of the Andean night. You are awake before the sun, not because of a sound, but because of a shift in the quality of the silence. The deep, absolute stillness of the dead of night has given way to the faintest whisper of an approaching dawn. Your body knows the rhythm. You lie for a moment, gathering. Your will, the memory of sleep, a pleasant, fading warmth. The cold is a patient predator, waiting for you to emerge from your woolen den. The routine is the same. Sit up, swing your legs over the side of the bed. The cool shock of the packed earth floor. You dress in the semi-darkness, your movements economical and sure. You don't need light to find your clothes. As you pull the tunic over your head, your fingers brush against the quipu hanging on its peg. Yesterday's work is done and stored, but this 1-year-old, worn practice quipu is always here. You take it down in the faint pre-dawn light filtering through the window slit. You run your fingers over its familiar knots. It's like a musician practicing scales. A knot for 100, a knot for 47, a knot for 903. You tie and untie them, keeping your fingers nimble, your muscle memory sharp. There is a peculiar type of knot used for 0 on empty space in the correct positional slot. It's a brilliantly simple concept, the placeholder 0, which was a sophisticated mathematical idea that not all cultures developed. The Incas had it, right here in their strings. It allowed them to distinguish between, say, the number 501 and 51, Without that placeholder concept, complex accounting is nearly impossible. You hear the first real sound of the day, the distant, mournful bray of a donkey from the village below. It's a sound of complaint, of resignation, of another day of hard work about to begin. It's the valley's alarm clock. You sling your practice quipu over your shoulder and step out into the courtyard. The sky is the color of a pale lilac, and the air has that clean, sharp smell of a world washed new. Today's work will be different. Wayne informed you yesterday evening, before he left, that a magistrate is arriving from Cusco. He is here to settle a land dispute between two communities, and he has requested, or rather, demanded the presence of the Kipicamox. The dispute, you understand, is an old one, stretching back generations. Both communities have their own kippas, their own knotted histories of land ownership, passed down from father to son. Your job will not be to create a new record, but to read and interpret these ancient conflicting documents. This is the most difficult and prestigious work a Kipicamox can do. It is one thing to record last season's potato harvest. It is another thing entirely to read a 70-year-old quipu whose colors have faded and whose original creator is long dead, and to present its testimony in a legal dispute. Historians still debate the formal legal standing of quipus in Spanish colonial courts. While often admitted as evidence, their interpretation was frequently contested, especially when they contradicted written documents held by Spanish landowners. Your testimony will be crucial. You see Wayne standing near the main gate, staring out at the road that winds down into the valley. He holds his own magnificent quipu, the master record of the district, draped over his arm like a regal sash. He looks less like an accountant this morning and more like a high priest preparing for a sacred ceremony. He turns as you approach, his eyes serious. "They will be here soon," he says. "Remember what you are. You are not a scribe. You are a voice for the strings. You speak what the knots tell you. Nothing more, nothing less." It is the longest speech you have ever heard him give. It settles in your chest with a profound weight. You are a translator for a silent, venerable witness. As the first rays of sun strike the high peaks, turning their snowy tips to molten gold, you see a small cloud of dust rising from the road far below. The magistrate from Cusco is coming. The day will not be about simple numbers. It will be about history, memory, and the conflicting truths that people tie into their records. The dust cloud on the valley road grows steadily, resolving itself into a small procession. It's not the grand entourage you might have expected. From a high-ranking official from Cusco, there are two men on horseback, their dark forms stark against the pale, dusty track, and three others, walking alongside, leading a pack mule. They move at the slow, deliberate pace dictated by the altitude and the terrain. It's a reminder that no matter how important you are, the mountains have the final say in your travel schedule. You and Wayne stand by the gate, a silent, welcoming committee of two. The air is still and cold, and you can hear the faint clink of a bridle and the crunch of hooves on gravel long before they arrive. The magistrate is a stout, imposing man in a dark velvet doublet and a wide-brimmed hat, clothes ill-suited for the rugged landscape. He looks hot and uncomfortable, his face flushed with the effort of the journey. He dismounts with a heavy sigh, handing the reins to one of his attendants. His companion is a younger man, a clerk, with a perpetually worried expression and a large, leather-bound book clutched to his chest as if it were a holy relic. The magistrate, whose name is Don Alvaro de Mendoza, gives the compound a cursory, dismissive glance, His eyes sweep over you and Wayna, lingering for a moment on the kippus draped over your arms. There's a flicker of something in his expression, a mixture of grudging respect and unconcealed disdain. He needs you, but he doesn't like that he needs you. "You are the Kipakamox?" he asks, his Spanish crisp and formal. Wayna simply inclines his head. "I am Wayna. This is my student. We are at your service." "Good," Don Alvaro says, not unkindly, but with the brisk impatience of a man who has a long list of things to do and wishes he was somewhere else. "The petitioners will be here shortly. We will convene in the main hall. I trust you have a table." "It's not really a question." He strides past you into the courtyard, his clerk scurrying behind him like a nervous shadow. "You have to admit, for a man who seems to consider breathing this air a personal insult, he has a certain flair for making an entrance." You follow them into the long, cool darkness of the record hall. The clerk immediately begins setting up, placing the leather-bound book on the main table with a reverent thud, followed by an inkwell, a pot of sand for blotting, and a bundle of sharpened quill pens. It all looks terribly fussy and fragile compared to your sturdy, self-contained kippus. If you drop a quipu, you pick it up. If he drops that inkwell, his afternoon is ruined. Soon, the petitioners arrive. They are the elders from the two villages. At the heart of the dispute, a cluster of anxious-looking men in woven ponchos, their faces weathered by sun and worry. They enter the hall with a quiet, shuffling reverence, removing their hats and holding them in their hands. Each delegation is led by one man who carries his village's quipu. They are not like your neat, administrative records. These are ancient, sacred objects. One is a cascade of earthy browns, greens, and ochres, the colors of the land itself. The other is predominantly black and white, with stark flashes of crimson. They are laid upon the table with ceremonial care, two conflicting, knotted histories, lying side dash by dash side. The major historical fact here is the resilience of these communal land records. For generations after the conquest, indigenous communities continued to use kippas to define their ancestral territories, often bringing them into Spanish courts as primary evidence against settler encroachment. These kippas were not just deeds. They were chronicles, genealogies, and sacred maps all twisted into one. Don Alvaro sits at the head of the table, looking like a judge presiding over a case he finds both tedious and bizarre. He gestures to the kippas. "These things," he says, "purport to describe the boundaries. I want you to tell me what they say." He turns his gaze to Wayna. The entire room is silent, holding its breath. The fate of a patch of high-altitude pastureland and the honor of two villages now rests on the interpretation of these faded, tangled strings. Wayna steps forward to the table. He doesn't touch the kippas at first. He simply looks at them, his eyes half closed, as if listening to a silent conversation. The air is thick with tension. The village elders watch his every move, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and fear. The Spanish clerk has his quill poised over a fresh sheet of paper, ready to transcribe the proceedings into his own linear form of knowing. The contrast is stark, the silent, three-dimensional language of the knots versus the scratchy, two-dimensional scrawl of the pen. Finally, Wayna reaches out and gently picks up the first quipu, the one of earthy greens and browns. He holds it, not like a document, but like a living thing. He lets the cords hang, feeling its weight and balance. The elder from the corresponding village, a man with a face as wrinkled as a dried potato, leans forward almost imperceptibly, This is the Quipu of the Elu Pucara, Wayne says, his voice filling the hall. An Elu is a traditional Andean community, a network of families bound by kinship and a common territory. It's a concept that predates the Incas by centuries. It records the lineage of their leaders and the lands they hold. He begins the reading. His fingers move with a slow, deliberate grace, isolating a specific chord. This green string, he says, tracing its path, represents the high pasture in question, Puna land. He follows it down to a series of knots. The knots here mark its boundaries. They are not numbers, but markers. This long knot, he indicates a specific, complex knot, represents a great stone, a wanka, that stands to the west. He then moves to a subsidiary cord, a grey one. This grey string attached to the green one is a story. It tells of the year the Pucara people first drove their llamas to this pasture. In the time of the great drought, when the grandfather of this man's grandfather was a boy, the Spanish magistrate, Don Alvaro, shifts impatiently in his seat. The story is very moving, I'm sure, he says, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But what about the measurements? The legal descriptions? This is a classic clash of worldviews. To Don Alvaro, land is a commodity, defined by surveys and titles on paper. To the Pucara elder, the land is defined by sacred landmarks, ancestral usage, and the stories that bind the people to the place. The legal description is the story. Wayne does not react to the interruption. He simply moves his fingers to another knot on the green string. This knot indicates a stream, the one that flows from the melting snow. The Quipu claims the Pucara lands extend to the far side of this stream. He then gently places the Quipu down and picks up the second one, the stark black and white record of the Elu. This Quipu, he says, his voice even tells a different story. His fingers find a black cord, the color of stone and shadow. Here, the same pasture is marked. The great stone is here. He points to a knot. But the boundary, not for the stream, is different. This one claims the stream itself as the boundary. The land of the Mache people ends at the water's edge. There it is. The conflict, laid bare in two different twists of wool, one knot versus another, one story versus another. The elders on both sides of the room stare at the Quipus, then at Wayne. They are not just looking at records, they are looking at their history, their identity, their truth. Historians can only speculate about how such disputes were resolved before the Spanish arrived. It was likely a process of negotiation, of oral testimony, where respected elders would interpret the Quipus in a council, seeking a consensus rather than a unilateral judgment. Now, the power rests with one man in a velvet coat who doesn't understand the language, the culture, or the land. You watch Don Alvaro's face. He looks annoyed, as if he was hoping for a simple, numerical answer and has instead been given a riddle. The silence in the room deepens. The two Quipus lie on the table, a silent testament to a conflict that is now for others to resolve. Don Alvaro leans back in his chair, the wood creaking in protest. He steeples his fingers and stares at the two Quipus, as if they have personally offended him. So, we have a disagreement, he says, with the air of a man stating the painfully obvious. One set of strings says one thing, the other says something else. This is helpful. The sarcasm is so thick, you could almost tie a knot. In it, he turns his gaze back to Wayne. Is there nothing else? No date of creation? No official seal tied into the chords. He is grasping for concepts from his own world, the world of notarized documents and royal stamps. The idea that authority could reside in the texture of the wool, or the memory of the community, is utterly foreign to him. Wayna calmly picks up the Pucara Quipu again, the green and brown one. "There is more," he says, his voice quiet but carrying authority. He isolates a thin, unassuming cord you hadn't noticed before, dyed a pale, washed-out yellow. This cord is a record of tribute. It shows that the people of Pucara paid tax to the Inca in maize for the use of this land. His fingers slide down the cord. The knots count the number of years the tribute was paid. There are 67 knots. 67 years before the arrival of your fathers. A murmur ripples through the Pucara elders. This is a powerful piece of evidence, linking their claim to the authority of the old empire. The clerk scribbles furiously, his quill scratching against the paper. Wayna then turns to the black and white Quipu of the Ilu Mache. He searches for a similar cord. He finds one, a small, grey string. The Mackay Quipu also has a tribute record, he announces, but it is different. The knots here show a tribute of woven blankets, not maize, and they count. 42 years. The room is silent. Wayna has not offered an opinion or a judgment. He has simply read what the knots told him, but the implication is clear. The Pucara have a longer record of tribute associated with this specific pasture. It doesn't prove their claim, but it lends it the weight of history. The major historical fact is that the Spanish, while dismantling the Incan Empire, often paradoxically ended up reinforcing the authority of its records. In land disputes, evidence of having paid tribute to the Inca was often seen as proof of legitimate, long-standing possession. Don Alvaro chews on this for a moment. He seems to appreciate this line of reasoning more. It involves taxes, which is a concept he understands perfectly. So, he says slowly, one group paid for longer. That is something, at least. But then, the elder from the Ilu Mache, a stern-faced man who has been silent until now, speaks up. His Spanish is halting, but his voice is firm. "Ask him," he says, pointing a trembling finger at Wayna, "to read the knot at the very end of our tribute cord." Wayna, his expression unreadable, turns his attention back to the Mache Quipu. He finds the end of the grey tribute cord. His experienced fingers trace the final knot. He pauses. It is a long, heavy silence. You lean forward slightly, trying to see the knot yourself. It looks unusual, complicated. It's one of those figure-of-8 knots with an extra loop. The kind you saw yesterday. The kind Wayna told you held a secret meaning. Finally, Wayna looks up, first at the Mache elder, then at the magistrate. "The final knot," he says, his voice low, "is the one that signifies paid under protest." The hall erupts in murmurs. The Mache elder nods grimly. Don Alvaro looks utterly bewildered. Paid under protest. What in God's name does that mean? They paid their taxes angrily. It means, Wayna explains patiently, that they believed the tribute was being unjustly demanded. It means they disputed the Inca's right to tax them for that land, even as they paid it. He doesn't elaborate further. He doesn't need to. He has just introduced a profound complication. The Pucara have a longer claim, but the Mache have a documented history of challenging that claim, a silent, knotted objection that has survived for over a century. The neat, simple solution Don Alvaro was hoping for has just unraveled, leaving a tangled mess of history and pride on the table. Don Alvaro de Mendoza stares at the Quipu as if it has just grown legs and insulted his mother. "Paid under protest," he repeats, tasting the words. "A knot. A single, ridiculous knot is supposed to represent a formal legal objection. He throws his hands up in a gesture of pure theatrical frustration. This is what I have to work with. Witchcraft and twine. The clerk, sensing his master's mood, sinks a little lower in his chair, trying to become one with the furniture. The village elders, however, are now sitting straighter. The proceeding has moved beyond simple numbers and into the realm of honor and ancient grievances, a territory they understand far better than the magistrate. "It is not witchcraft, sir," Wayner says, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "It is a record, as clear as the ink in your clerk's book, to one who can read it. This is as close to a rebuke as you have ever heard Wayner deliver, and it's so subtle that Don Alvaro seems to miss the sting entirely." "Fine," the magistrate grumbles, rubbing his temples. "Fine, put the knotted monstrosities away. Let us hear from the living." He points a finger at the Pucara elder. "You, what is your claim?" The old man rises, his joints cracking audibly in the silence. He begins to speak, not in Spanish, but in the rich, guttural tones of Quechua. He speaks of his grandfather's stories, of the sacredness of the Wanka stone, of the patterns of the stars that tell his people when to move their herds. He is not making a legal argument. He is painting a picture of his people's entire relationship with the cosmos, a picture in which that specific pasture is an inextricable part. The clerk looks up from his papers in a panic. He doesn't understand a word, in Spanish, for the love of all that is holy. Don Alvaro barks. An awkward pause follows. A younger man from the Pucara delegation steps forward to translate, but something is immediately lost. The soaring poetry of the old man's speech is reduced to a flat, legalistic summary. He says, "The land has always been theirs. The magic has vanished, leaving only a dry, unconvincing husk." Then, Don Alvaro turns to the Mache elder, and you, the Mache elder, emboldened by the revelation of his protest, not, also speaks in Quechua. He tells a different story, a tale of a blood feud from the time of the great Inca Pachacati, of a pact sealed with coca leaves that was later broken, of how the Pucara used their influence with a corrupt local governor to seize the land. It's a compelling, dramatic narrative of betrayal and injustice. Again, a translator reduces it to a simple sentence. He says the Pucara stole the land from them a long time ago. You are witnessing a profound failure of translation, not just of language, but of worldview. The Spanish court demands facts, dates, and figures, data that can be written down and filed away. The elders are offering context, tradition, and sacred history data that is woven into the fabric of their lives. It's like trying to explain the concept of color to a person who can only see in black and white. It is not known for sure how often official translators were used in these proceedings, but it's clear their role was fraught with difficulty, mediating between two fundamentally different ways of understanding truth and evidence. You find yourself glancing at the Quipas again. They seem more honest, somehow. They hold the data of the years of tribute, the boundary markers, the protest without losing the nuance. The knot doesn't just say protest, it is the protest, a physical manifestation of dissent. It is more eloquent than the fumbling translations. Don Alvaro, having listened to the two flattened, uninspiring summaries, looks more tired than ever. So, one of you is a thief, and the other is a liar. Or perhaps you are both. This is progress. He sighs, a deep, world-weary sound. We will break for the midday meal. I need to think. He rises and sweeps out of the hall, his clerk gathering his precious ink and paper and scurrying after him. The two delegations of elders are left staring at each other across the long table, the silence thick with a century of bad blood. The two kippers lie between them, their silent testimony hanging unresolved in the air. The moment the magistrate is gone, the fragile peace in the hall dissolves. The elders from the two delegations don't shout or come to blows. The animosity is colder and deeper than that. They begin to speak in low, intense Quechua, their words like stones thrown across the table. They aren't speaking to each other, but at each other, restating their claims. Their voices layered with generations of inherited resentment. You and Wayne stand apart, silent observers. Your role is complete, for now. You are the librarians who have brought out the books. It is up to the patrons to argue over the contents. Wayne carefully, respectfully, rolls up each of the disputed kippers and sets them aside, moving them out of the line of fire. It feels like you are protecting the evidence from the raw emotion it has unleashed. The midday meal is a tense, miserable affair. It is not eaten communally like yesterday. The two delegations take their bowls of quinoa stew and huddle in separate corners of the courtyard, pointedly ignoring each other. They eat in a grim, stony silence. Don Alvaro and his clerk take their meal in the magistrate's temporary quarters, a private room that has been hastily prepared for him. You can hear his loud, exasperated sighs even through the thick stone walls. He is a man at the end of his rope, and the rope is a tangled, knotted mess of Andean history. You find a quiet spot on the same sun-warmed steps as yesterday. The stew is the same, the sun feels the same, but the atmosphere is entirely different. The quiet, meditative rhythm of the compound has been shattered by this intrusion of external conflict. The llamas, at least, remain blissfully unconcerned. One of them is staring at the tense scene with its large, dark eyes, chewing slowly, its expression one of mild, detached curiosity, as if watching a particularly boring play. You find its placid indifference strangely comforting. You look at Wayne. He is eating slowly, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks. He seems entirely untroubled, a calm island in a sea of human discord. You wonder what he is thinking. Is he weighing the evidence in his own mind? Does he have an opinion on who is right? Or does he, like a true Kippakomak, see only the data? The knots, as they are, without judgment. A peculiar, cultural tidbit in some regions. It was considered deeply improper for a Kippakamork to offer a personal interpretation of a Kipu's meaning during a dispute. Their duty was to be a neutral conduit, a reader in the most literal sense. To offer an opinion would be to corrupt the record, to insert their own voice where only the voice of the strings should be heard. Wayne is adhering to this principle. Perfectly, he has presented the evidence. His work is done. It's a level of professional detachment that modern consultants would kill for. The meal ends. The elders return to the hall, their faces grim. The magistrate reappears, looking not rested, but more agitated than before. He has clearly not enjoyed his lunch. He strides to the table and slams his palm down on its surface. The sound echoes in the silent room, making everyone jump. "I have made a decision," he announces, his voice ringing with forced authority. "Since these knotted records are contradictory and your stories are self-serving, I will rely on a different kind of evidence." He turns to his clerk. "Bring the maps." The clerk fumbles with a large rolled-up tube of parchment. He unrolls it on the table. It is a Spanish map of the region, drawn with ink and watercolor. It shows rivers, mountains, and villages, but it is a strangely empty landscape. The sacred places, the ancestral paths, the stories, none of them are there. It is a map of property, not of a homeland. This is the ultimate expression of the Spanish worldview, the flat, abstract, gridded representation of the land, which they saw as definitive. This map, created by a Spanish surveyor who likely spent a few weeks in the area, was about to be given more weight than the quipus that held a century of lived experience. Don Alvaro stabs a finger onto the parchment. According to the Royal Survey of 1585, he declares, the official boundary is this stream. The land to the west belongs to the Alu Pucara. The land to the east belongs to the Alu Mache. The case is closed. A stunned silence fills the hall. The elders from both villages stare at the map, a document they have never seen before, written in a language they cannot read, which has just summarily dismissed their entire history. The Pucara elder, who technically won, looks just as bewildered as the Mache elder who lost. The judgment is based on a logic so alien to them that it is almost meaningless. It's like settling a family argument by consulting the flight patterns of birds. The Mache elder finds his voice first. The map is wrong, he says, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The stream, it moves. After the great rains 10 years ago, it carved a new path. It is half a day's walk from where it was in my grandfather's time. This is a major point that the Spanish, coming from a continent with ancient, slow-moving rivers, frequently failed to grasp. About the Andes, here the landscape is alive and violent. Earthquakes, landslides, and seasonal floods can dramatically alter the course of a river or the shape of a mountainside overnight. A boundary defined by a feature as fluid as a mountain stream is a boundary drawn in sand. The Quipu, by contrast, tied its boundary to a great stone, a Inca something permanent and unmoving. Don Alvaro waves a dismissive hand. The official map is the official map, he says, his tone leaving no room for argument. The stream is the line. I don't care if it now flows through the center of your village. The judgment stands. My clerk will draw up the official document. He looks pleased with himself, as if he has finally managed to hammer this messy, organic problem into a neat, square box. He has imposed order, his order, on a situation he did not understand. The clerk, looking relieved that the ordeal is almost over, begins to write, his quill making, confident, scratching sounds on the expensive paper. He is formalizing the decision, turning the magistrate's decree into an artifact of the Spanish bureaucracy. In a year, this document, stored in an archive in Cusco, will be the only truth that matters. The quipus will be dismissed as quaint, unreliable folklore. The delegation from Alu Mache is devastated. They have not just lost pasture land, they have lost their story. Their protest, not that tiny century-old act of defiance, has been rendered meaningless by a line on a piece of parchment. The elder looks at Wayna, his eyes pleading, as if hoping the Kipakemok might intervene, might perform some final, magical interpretation that could save them. But Wayna remains silent, his face a mask of impenetrable calm. He has done his job. He spoke for the knots. He cannot speak for the magistrate. The Pucara elders are not celebrating. They are deeply uneasy. They won, but they know the judgment is based on a falsehood, the map's inaccurate depiction of the stream. This is not justice. It is a random outcome, a bureaucratic accident. To build your future on such a foundation feels dangerous. It is a victory without honor, and in this world, an honorless victory is no victory at all. You watch as the clerk finishes his writing. He sprinkles sand on the ink to dry it, then blows it gently away. He rolls up the document and hands it. To the magistrate, Don Alvaro stands. The business of this court is concluded, he announces to the silent, unhappy room. He gives a curt nod and sweeps out, eager to be on his way, to leave this strange, high-altitude world of talking knots and moving rivers behind him. The elders slowly file out of the hall, not even looking at each other now. The energy for conflict has evaporated, replaced by a shared, hollow sense of defeat. They have been judged by a power they cannot comprehend, based on evidence they do not recognize. You are left alone in the hall with Wayna and the two ancient Quipus, which still lie on the table, their stories now officially irrelevant. The afternoon sun slants through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the silent, empty air. The day's work has ended, not with a resolution, but with a quiet, bitter emptiness. You and Wayna remain in the silent hall for a long time after everyone has left. The only sound is the faint high-altitude wind whistling through the cracks in the stone. The Spanish map is gone, taken by the clerk as official evidence. But the two Quipus remain on the table, looking vulnerable and a little bit sad, like two elderly relatives who have been told their memories no longer count. Wayna finally moves. He walks to the table and picks up the mache quipu, the black and white one. He unrolls it, his fingers finding the grey tribute chord. He traces it to the end, to the protest knot. He holds it for a moment, his thumb resting on the complex twist of wool. His expression is unreadable, but you feel a profound sense of melancholy emanating from him. He is not just looking at a knot. He is looking at a century of failed communication. They will not forget this, he says, his voice a low murmur. He is not talking about the magistrate or the map. He is talking about the people of the two villages. This judgment has not settled the dispute. It has planted a new and more bitter seed. He is right. The magistrate's decision, based on a flawed map, has not created peace. It has created a fresh injustice, one that will be retold and resented for generations to come. It will become a new story, a new grievance to be passed down. Perhaps one day to be tied into a new quipu. You look at the quipu in his hands. It is an incredible repository of data, but it is also fragile. Not physically, the wool is strong, the dye is long. It is fragile because its meaning depends on a shared cultural understanding. Once that understanding is lost or overruled by a more powerful culture, the quipu becomes mute. Its knots become mere decoration. This is the great tragedy of the quipu system. The Spanish did not burn them all, as they did with many Maya and Aztec codices. Instead, they slowly, methodically, made them irrelevant. The major historical fact is that by the 18th century, the use of quipus had almost entirely died out, not through an outright ban, but because the Spanish administrative and legal systems simply ceased to accept them as valid documents. The knowledge of how to read them faded within a few generations, leaving thousands of these knotted records as beautiful, impenetrable enigmas. Wayna carefully rolls up the mache quipu and hands it to you. Take this back to the elders, he says. Tell them to keep it safe. A story is never truly lost as long as someone is left to guard it. He then picks up the pukara quipu and holds it out. And take this to the others. Tell them the same, you. Take the two quipus. They feel heavy in your arms, weighted with the history and sorrow of the day. You leave the hall and step out into the late afternoon sun. The courtyard is empty. The magistrate and his entourage are already gone, a faint plume of dust on the valley road, the only evidence they were ever here. You find the two delegations preparing to leave, loading their few supplies onto their llamas. They are still not speaking to each other. You approach the Mackay elders first. You hold out their black and white quipu. The lead elder takes it from you, his hands gentle, as if receiving a fallen comrade. You repeat Wayna's words, "Keep it safe. A story is never truly lost as long as someone is left to guard it." The elder looks at you, his eyes filled with a deep, weary sadness. He clutches the quipu to his chest and gives you a single, solemn nod. He understands. The knot of protest may have been ignored today, but it is not broken. It will be preserved. You then walk across the courtyard to the Pukara delegation. You hand them their green and brown quipu. You repeat the same words. The Pukara elder accepts his quipu with a troubled expression. His victory feels hollow. He knows his neighbors will now see him as the beneficiary of a foreign lie. The map may have given him the land, but it has cost him the peace. He, too, nods and holds his quipu tight. The two groups depart in opposite directions, two silent, unhappy processions walking back into the mountains, each carrying their knotted truths with them. You watch until both delegations are small specks in the vast, unforgiving landscape. The courtyard feels unnaturally quiet and empty now, the echoes of the day's conflict still hanging in the air. You feel emotionally drained, as if you have run a great distance. You have been a spectator to a slow, quiet car crash of cultures. And the wreckage is a pair of villagers set against each other for another generation. You turn and find Wayna watching you. He has a small, woven bag in his hand. "Come," he says, in a tone that is not quite an order, but holds an undeniable weight. The day's work is not yet finished. You follow him out of the compound gate, away from the buildings and the lingering tension. He leads you up a steep, narrow path that winds up the mountainside behind the administrative center. It's a path you've never taken before. The air gets thinner, colder. Your lungs burn with the effort of the climb. Wayna, who is decades older than you, moves with a steady, unhurried rhythm, seemingly unaffected by the altitude. After about 20 minutes of climbing, you arrive at a small, flat ledge. Before you is a simple, low structure of fieldstones, no bigger than a small hut. It has no roof. It is open to the sky. In the center of the stone enclosure is a single, large, flat-topped rock. The place has an aura of immense age and significance. It is a waka, a sacred place, a point of connection between the human world and the world of the spirits. Wayna enters the enclosure and approaches the central stone. He opens his small bag and takes out a handful of perfect, unblemished coca leaves. He holds them in his cupped hands, raises them to the sky, and blows on them gently, murmuring a prayer in Quechua, too soft for you to hear. He is making an offering to the Apus, the great mountain spirits that watch over this valley. He then carefully places the leaves on the stone. He turns to you. "The Spanish," he says, his voice quiet. "They bring their judges and their maps. They think they can draw lines on the world and make it so. But they do not make offerings to the mountains. They do not ask permission. Their foundation is weak. It has no roots in the land." He is showing you the other side of the Andean world, the one that operates on principles far older than the Inca, let alone the Spanish. It is a world of reciprocity, of respect for the powerful, unseen forces that govern life and death. The failed legal proceeding you witnessed today was, in this context, just a noisy distraction. The real power does not reside in a man with a velvet coat, but in the silent, brooding peaks that surround you. Waina then takes something else from his bag. It's a quipu, but one unlike any you have ever seen. It is small, with only a dozen cords. The cords are not wool, but are woven from silvery, shimmering threads you don't recognize. The knots are tiny and incredibly complex. It seems less like a record and more like a piece of jewelry or a sacred charm. A peculiar cultural tidbit passed down in whispers among Kipakamoks is the existence of these ritual heapers, which were not for accounting or storytelling, but for liturgical or divinatory purposes. Their knots were said to align with astronomical events or to chart the flow of sacred energy. It is an area of Quipu studies where scholarly certainty is virtually non-existent, and speculation runs wild. Wayna does not read this Quipu. He drapes it over the offering of coca leaves on the stone. "We do this," he says, "to maintain the balance. The magistrate has created a disharmony. We must offer a prayer to restore it." You stand there for a long time as the sun begins to sink, casting long, dramatic shadows across the valley. The wind is cold, but the sense of peace in this small, sacred space is profound. You understand now. Waina's calmness throughout the day was not detachment. It was a deep, unshakable faith in an order far greater than the petty squabbles of men. He knows that the magistrate's judgment is temporary. The map is temporary. The Spanish themselves are temporary. But the mountains, the spirits, and the need for balance, these are eternal. The day's final lesson is not about numbers or knots, but about perspective as the sun bleeds its final colors across the western sky. Waina carefully retrieves the small, shimmering quipu from the offering stone. He leaves the coca leaves for the mountain spirits. He tucks the ritual quipu back into his bag and gives you a simple nod. It's time to go. The walk down the mountain path is faster and easier than the climb up. The valley below is sinking into a deep pool of purple shadow, and the first stars are beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Pinpricks of cold, distant fire. Neither of you speaks. There is nothing left to say. The actions at the waka were a form of communication more profound than words. You have moved from the world of law and administration to the world of spirit and cosmology. And now you are returning, carrying a piece of that quiet, sacred space back with you. By the time you reach the compound, night has fully fallen. The familiar, comforting glow of the kitchen fire spills out into the courtyard. The smell of a simple evening meal, a soup of some kind, hangs in the air. The rhythm of life, so rudely interrupted by the day's events, is beginning to reassert itself. The llamas are settled. The day is done. The evening meal is a quiet one. The few others in the compound seem to sense the lingering weight of the day and keep their conversation to a minimum. Kunta, the old storyteller, is there. He catches your eye from across the fire and gives you a look of deep understanding. A look that says, "I heard what happened." It is the way of things. For now, he does not ask for details. He knows the story already, in its essence. It's an old story. The story of a powerful outsider imposing a clumsy solution on a complex local problem. It's a story that has played out 1,000 times in 1,000 valleys across this land. After the meal, you don't linger by the fire. You are tired in a way that goes deeper than physical exhaustion. It is a weariness of the soul. You retreat to the solitude of your small stone room. The cold feels familiar, almost comforting. You light a small tallow candle tonight. its flickering flame pushing back the heavy darkness, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. You sit on the edge of your bed platform, your practice quipu in your hands. You don't tie numbers. Instead, you find yourself trying to replicate the knot you saw on the Mache Kaputha protest knot, the figure of 8 with the extra loop. Your fingers feel clumsy. You try once, and the result is a tangled mess. You undo it. You try again, focusing, remembering the way Wayna's fingers held it. This time, it's closer, but still not right. The tension is wrong. This is the challenge of preserving this knowledge. It's not something that can be easily written down. It is embodied, passed from hand to hand, from master to student. It requires practice, patience, and a feel for the material that can't be taught from a book. Historians still struggle to replicate some of the more complex knots found on surviving kippas, a testament to the incredible skill and dexterity of the kipakamoks. You try a third time. You slow down, breaking the process into tiny steps. The loop, the twist, the pull-through, the final tightening. This time, it holds. It's not as elegant as Wayna's or the one on the ancient quipu, but it is recognizable. A small, silent knot of protest, sitting on a string in your hand in the flickering candlelight. It feels like a small victory in a day full of losses. It is a tiny act of preservation, a commitment to remembering the stories that the outsiders deem irrelevant. You look at the knot. It is not just a piece of data, it is a statement. It is a feeling frustration, injustice, resilience, physical form. You realize now that a quipu is not just a tool for counting. It is a tool for feeling. It is a way of holding on to the emotional texture of the past. You blow out the candle and slip under your heavy blanket, the shape of the knot still imprinted on your mind. The day has been a lesson in the limits of power, the fragility of knowledge, and the quiet, stubborn resilience of a story tied into a string. Sleep does not come easily. The day's events churn in your mind, a confusing mixture of legal drama, cultural misunderstanding, and quiet spirituality. You lie in the darkness, feeling the deep, resonant silence of the Andes. You think about the two kippas, now on their way back to their respective villages, two bundles of knotted truth. Will a time come when no one can read them? When the stories they hold will be locked away forever, the knots just meaningless tangles on a string. The thought fills you with a profound sense of loss. But then you remember Wayna on the mountainside, his calm faith in a deeper, more enduring order, his quiet offering to the spirits of the place. Perhaps the knowledge is not as fragile as it seems. Perhaps it doesn't just reside in the hands of a few trained experts. Perhaps it is woven into the land itself, into the stories of people like Konta, into the very stones of the waka. Maybe the quipu is just one expression of a truth that finds other ways to survive. Your breathing begins to slow, to deepen. The sharp edges of your thoughts start to soften and blur. The cold of the room fades as warmth pools in your limbs under the heavy blanket. You are drifting now on that slow, gentle current that carries you from the shore of wakefulness to the vast, quiet ocean of sleep. You imagine the compound around you, a small island of human warmth in the immense, cold darkness of the mountains. You think of the llamas, sleeping soundly, their long-suffering faces peaceful in the moonlight. You think of Wayna in his own room, perhaps already asleep, his mind as still and deep as a mountain lake. The image of the quipu returns to your mind, but it is different now. It is not a document of conflict, but a vast, cosmic web. Each string is a life, each not a connection. The colors are not for tribute or taxes, but for emotions, deep reds for love, cool blues for sorrow, brilliant yellows for joy, earthy greens for the connection to the land. You see the strings stretching out from your small valley, connecting you to all the other valleys, all the other people, all the other stories, past and present. The web shimmers in the darkness, a great, silent network of shared humanity. It is a comforting thought, a thought that tells you that nothing is ever truly lost, that every life leaves a knot in the great cord of time. The tension in your shoulders releases, your mind lets go of the day. You are floating now, untethered, drifting into the deep, restorative peace you have earned. The story of the knotted strings fades, and all that is left is the gentle, rhythmic whisper of your own breath, a quiet counterpoint to the immense, silent music of the Andean night. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Sleep with Stories. We hope the quiet rhythms of the past have brought you some measure of peace and rest tonight. As you continue to drift, let the images of the high mountains, the patient work of human hands, and the silent language of the strings carry you deeper into your slumber. Let the details of the day fall away like pebbles into a deep, still well, leaving only a sense of calm and tranquility. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to think about, just the gentle pull of sleep, the soft weight of your blankets, and the knowledge that you are safe and sound. The story is over. Your night is just beginning. Sleep well.